Hey cousins, welcome to Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Welcome, cousins, to this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. I'm your host, Cornell Wright, the People's Lobbyist. Today, let's talk about China in space.
Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas is intended for the participation of responsible adults of legal drinking age who wish to engage in substantive virtual discussions and social drinking for entertainment purposes only. Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas does not advocate the abuse of alcoholic beverages. Choosing to participate in any of the drinking activities shared in the program should be made with moderation and caution and is the sole responsibility of the user.
So, cousins, keep wearing your mask. Why? Because wearing your mask has shown to minimize or prevent the spread of respiratory-borne diseases. For example, COVID-19 that we've talked about and you hear about almost every day, as well as the normal flu that comes along once a year. If you recall, I said on this program, as well as you've heard in other situations, that because of our wearing masks last year in 2020 and social distancing and all this other good protective activities, the amount of flu cases in the United States almost went to zero, very low, historically low. Typically, the normal flu kills about 30 to 40,000 cousins a year. Last year, the numbers, I think, was less than 100. You can check me on that if you want to, which says that masks work. So keep wearing your mask, cousins. And for those of you who get your flu vaccine, I'd highly recommend it because it's proven that it works. And or as we're seeing with the COVID-19, it may not prevent you from getting the flu, but it will minimize the effects of that. Sometimes the minimization cannot be dying, so it's worthwhile, cousins. All right? Take care. So, cousins, today I want to talk about, and I apologize, some of the efforts of China in regards to their space program. Now, years back in the 60s, the United States was involved in a space race with Russia, in which we had astronauts, they had cosmonauts, and China is now getting into the game in a big way, and they have taikonauts. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. If it's not, I apologize. They also have developed within the last 4 or 5 years, in fact, that's three years, the Taichung Chinese space station. They have their own space station, cousins. So think about that. Here we are, the United States was involved in this sort of thing, but China now is building its own space station. And from the reports I'm getting and research I've done, they're planning on completing their space station in 2022. So we heard, and what was reported, that 3 Chinese taikonauts had a chance to return safely from working on their space station in a 3-month exercise project, whatever you want to call it, working in space on their space platform. So you ask yourself, well, gee, why is that? Isn't there the International Space Station? Well, yes, there is. But that's a little bit of a story we'll cover in just a moment. A quick review of what China has been accomplishing within the last few years is that they have an organization called the China Manned Space Agency, which is pretty much responsible for China's activities in those areas. You may have remembered last year in May timeframe of this year, May 2021, China landed a Mars rover on the planet Mars. I think it arrived maybe a month after our Mars rover landed. But when you're talking about shooting to Mars and being a month difference, that's a pretty close window, isn't it? You can call that a close second. As well as, and you may have missed it, some of you cousins, but in 2021, in January, China had the first mission to have a landing of rover capabilities on the dark side of the moon. Now, so you think about, well, dark side of the moon, well, people have gone around the moon, as we have in other nations, most notably Russia, and I believe China as well. But to have a landing requires a little more technology. Because think about it, cousins. The reason why the dark side of the moon is so difficult is that when you have telecommunication signals, they go in straight lines, right? So once you get to the moon, it goes around it. You can't get to the dark side. So what did they do? They put a stationary satellite going around the room and then effectively pulled off a bank shot, cousins, putting signals off the space station that they had around the moon in order to be able to land their vehicle on the dark side of the moon. For all you cousins who play pool, a bank shot's more difficult than a straight-in shot, isn't it? A bank shot requires more technology and more expertise. And the Chinese did it. The first time there was a landing by someone from this planet on the dark side of the moon to our knowledge. So you start looking at that, you start thinking, well, gee, this is a pretty substantial teamwork that's coming together in regards to the technology to putting all these things together. And so what's happening? Well, so you go back and you look at that in 2011, when United States, being the primary architect, was working on the International Space Station. We agreed with Japan, with Russia, I think Great Britain, France, and a number of others in order to create the space station. We eliminated, although they asked, for China to be a part of the folks going into the space station. So in 2011, they were basically told no. From my research, the reason they were told no is because there had been some improprieties as identified that China was engaged with in regards to getting some secrets or some information. And because of that, this international activity, hopefully providing some international aspects or capabilities to the planet Earth in regards to looking at what's going out in the solar system, they were denied the opportunity of participating. So, cousins, what happened? As you might imagine, if someone told you that you can't play with their ball, you go get your own ball, right? That's exactly what China's done. They've gotten their own ball, and they're building their own space station. And by the way, our former competitors in regards to the space race, remember going back to the 60s, Russia's not only on our space station, the International Space Station, but reports are that when completed, Russia's going to be participating with the Chinese in their space station. Cousins. Now, of course, we don't know all that's behind the decision. But at this point in time, playing it forward, it looks like that was a bad idea to exclude one of the largest technological countries in the world, thinking that we were ahead and they were never interested or able to catch up. And then now we're in a clearly, in my opinion, a race. What do you think? Two different space stations, one from the international, sponsored pretty much by the United States with other technological capabilities and resources from others, and then one being done by Russia. From my reading of some of the documentation, for those who were actually the technology people and the various folks who were going into space, they wanted to work together. It was the politicians and the generals and those kind of people that saw there were some differences. By the way, and Russia is playing on both sides, right, cousins? What do you think about that? And so just to put a little more depth to this, there have been 13 different countries, including some relatively new ones, in addition to Russia, who have had some of their naughts, for lack of better phraseology, get a chance to come up and visit and do some experimentation and learn and grow and share with some of the data that's being researched at the International Space Station, but not China. So now, as you look for that, there are, I would say, some competition. And if it were me, cousins, as I'm sure it was you talk to any of the older cousins back in the day when there was the space race against Russia. There was a lot of patriotism, there was a lot of excitement, there was a lot of joy, there was energy associated with thinking, gee, we're advancing into space. Our technology, our capabilities, our will, our determination, our bravery on some of those earlier flights. Why wouldn't the Chinese government now be telling their people the same thing, and why wouldn't they be having the same pride in their country and their technological advancements as we do? And so you think about it, cousins, doesn't China, just as a sidebar, don't they manufacture Apple Watches and PCs? And so when did we think that we were going to start having or maintain some competitive advantage over them in regards to technology, this thing that's going forward? Come on, cousins, that was a bad idea. So, cousins, you think about it, there's an old saying. You keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I'm not calling China an enemy. I'm not necessarily calling them a friend, but I'm calling them a very worthy and honorable competitor. And so if you're in competition, and sure, we all want to win, and we all want to advance, you want to do it alone, you want to do it together. Because obviously, cousins, China's in the game, they're playing the game, and you make your own call as to how close they are or how close it is. I think it's almost by a nose, and pick your own winner. Because we don't know what else is coming, right? Along the line. But one of the little tidbits is that I heard that based upon the time frame in which they're doing their development of their space station, it's going to be newer than the space station in the United States with the International Space Station put in place, and in fact be able to last longer. So, cousins, China's definitely in the space. Is it a space race? Nobody's calling it that. Is there a space competition? I think that's the only thing fair to say. Until you get to the point that you're cooperating, it's competition, right? Let's get back to more of a cooperation, because at the end of the day, all of mankind needs to go into space, not just the two major superpowers and some other people who want to hang on a little bit. You with me, cousins? Anyway, keep an eye on that, because dollars and allocation has to go. And I felt better when the space exploration aspects of the United States of America were being held by the government for our collective purposes than by private organizations, i.e., people who have a profit motive. Think about that, cousins. Thanks for joining me today, cousins. Remember, wear your mask. We all need to continue doing it to take care of all of our cousins. Our community matters. See you next week on Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
We are the people. Welcome to the show. Here we go again. Hey, cousin.